Good evening and welcome to everyone. Thank you for joining us tonight as we roll out our responsible reopening plan for hybrid learning. I also want to thank everyone for your patience and grace as we continue to plan and prepare for the start of school in person with our hybrid plan. As much as we all want how we do school to be normal, we know that it will be some time before we are there. We will share with you tonight what our hybrid plan will look like, what student and family expectations are during this plan to bring everyone back to school safely. Please know that we have listened to you. Our decisions have been made with input from teachers, staff, parents, administrators, and even students throughout the process. We are so excited to see all of our students back in school next week.
Thanks, Tracy. I'm Mike Draves, Assistant Superintendent for Berea City Schools, and part of my responsibility was to work on the different plans over the summer, working with our hybrid plan, our remote plan, and with our 5-day in-person plan. So one of the marching orders for the summertime is we really just said that we wanted to be able to provide the best possible education to our students during this global pandemic in grades for all grades, kids preschool through 12th grade. But at the heart of that was not sacrificing the health and safety of our students and staff. And so when we developed this goal, we have made sure that we've emphasized from the beginning that we were going to prepare for the worst, but hope for the best. And we had said from the beginning, we have to be able to go between these plans, between remote, between hybrid, and between all day, 5 days in person, because really the virus was what dictates what our schooling was going to look like. And we're trying to show that flexibility and illustrate that when the virus allows us, that we have the ability to bring kids back. And that's where we're at right now. We are really sticking to our guiding principles that we also laid out back over the summertime, providing for in-person instruction for all attending students as much as possible, and still being able to provide for remote distance learning for those families that were still uncomfortable in coming back to school in person. We have also said, and as we've illustrated, that we have to be prepared to accommodate our youngest learners, those with our special needs, and those that are most at risk have to be addressed, and make sure that we're trying to provide the best possible education for them. As we continue to follow the guidance from the Ohio Department of Health, the Ohio Department of Education, OHSAA, and the Cuyahoga County Board of Health. This slide you may have seen a few times by now, but it's basically the Berea City School District learning model in conjunction with the risk levels, the different color levels for the county. Purple being the highest level of risk, then red, orange, and yellow. This model really looks at the flexibility that we're planning for this year. As I had said, the virus determines what schooling is going to look like, and I think that what we've seen is that by wearing masks and by physically distancing, that we can keep the numbers trending in the right direction, and we can get our kids to school. This looks at where we could be based on the different color levels in the county, and currently in orange. So this gives us the ability to come in hybrid. Note that as well as that even in the red hybrid is option as well, Mrs. Wheeler discussed this at our last board meeting, that color does not necessarily immediately mean that we'll move to a different model of instruction, but rather we look for these trends to be sustained. You might be asking why hybrid? So there's a couple different reasons for that. These are just some of the rationale behind why we're going to move into a hybrid system. Hybrid provides us for safer face-to-face interaction with students and teachers. It obviously provides us being able to bring children in person, and really important part of schooling, socialization, giving kids that experience in person at least for a couple of days a week is better than nothing. Consistency and continuity of learning, we believe, by bringing the students in. Obviously, allowing for more social or physical distancing than what we would in an all-back model. And of course, allows us for in-person assessment and intervention, which is key. Some other reasons why hybrid is we obviously reduce our student attendance by 50% on average, and we meet to establish those safety guidelines. We'll be able to get as close to 6 feet apart as possible. all students during a hybrid, all students and staff during the hybrid plan must wear face coverings. And even on the school bus, it allows us to create greater distancing, where we don't have to put perhaps 2 students in a seat all the time, but we can, in many cases, get away with 1 student per seat on the bus, which is obviously preferable. At this time, I would like for Mr. Adam Marino, our Director of Academic Affairs, to talk a little bit about what the hybrid schooling models will look like.
So regardless of grade, your schedule is outlined based on students being either a blue or orange cohort, depending on your last name. So this will ensure students, all family members, will attend school on the same days. This will also ensure that we can maintain all the safety protocols, as Mike just said. So the building icon in the graphic represents that you will be learning face-to-face in a building this day. The computer icon in the graphic represents that you'll be learning from a computer on your designated day. And Friday, you will see that is a gray computer because this will be dictated by your teachers on your schedule and will consist of a variety of things. Some things are, but not limited to intervention, supports, enrichments, or assessments. So moving on to before we getting into more specifics of elementary versus secondary, there are some common terms that you may have been hearing. And just to clarify, these terms are synchronous and asynchronous. So prior to hearing these terms, most people have not heard of this in the education setting, outside the education setting prior to COVID, but they have been around. Those are just terms that have been around prior to COVID. Those terms have been around prior to remote learning, hybrid learning, or any other kind of learning. These terms existed and have been in play in every classroom across the globe. So these terms are not new, and there are advantages and disadvantages to each content delivery model. So some content is delivered synchronously, which just means live. And some content in all classrooms are delivered asynchronously, meaning on demand. So asynchronous examples, on demand, things like projects, streaming, any streaming video is an asynchronous way to get content. Discussion posts, homework would be considered asynchronous. If your notes are accessible, that are online, or any content posted online would be considered asynchronous. A book, reading, articles, if that book is accessible anytime, that is considered asynchronous. Journal writing prompts, the list goes on and on. There's a variety of examples there in the list provided. And the opposite, synchronous, just means live. So live debates, discussion, an unrecorded lecture would be considered live. Synchronous demonstrations, there's a lot of advantages and disadvantages to either one. There's no right or wrong. There's no good or bad. It just depends on the setting. So just to clear up those 2 terms before we move on to the specifics. Specifically then here, we have a hybrid schedule for grades 5 through 12. And like I said previously, you have a blue cohort of students, the A through L, their last names. They will be at school on Mondays and Wednesdays in the buildings, and on Tuesdays and Thursdays, they're going to engage in remote, synchronous, and asynchronous learning. Same goes with the orange cohort of students, last names M through Z, and just the opposite. They're at school on Tuesdays and Thursdays, and on Mondays and Wednesdays, they will engage in remote, synchronous, live, or on-demand asynchronous learning. So while on these remote learning days, students were still going to follow their daily schedule. And Fridays will allow, again, for students to seek help, continue learning the content presented during the week. Moving on to grades K4. Very similarly, with the last names in the blue, there is Mondays and Wednesdays, they're in person getting their content. On Tuesdays and Thursdays, they will engage in remote asynchronous learning. So the biggest differences between the two, not to just read the slides for you, is that why K4 is not simply just streaming into their classes while they are at home. Similarly to grades 5 through 12 is really just because of the independence of those students. As a former elementary teacher myself, managing student behaviors when independence is not as a parent presents its own challenges. So there will be likely instances, perhaps as this process evolves over the days, weeks, and months, and as an elementary class may be able to stream online while a group is face-to-face, perhaps reading a story, for example, And knowing some of our teachers and getting to know our teachers this year, I'm sure there's going to be quite a few of them that are going to try and embrace that challenge and try at some point to try and stream both. But for the most part, grades K through 4 will be synchronous when they're in person in the buildings, and they'll be asynchronous. They'll be on-demand lessons on the days they are not in the building. So the model looks like this. Again, you got the A through L group. That's the blue group. They're in person on those days, Mondays, Wednesdays, home Tuesdays and Thursdays. Friday stays, the same as in remote. You have your in-person is synchronous. At home is asynchronous. Well, special area classes are still taking place. They're on a 2-week rotation. So because they're in person 2 days a week, and there is a 4-day rotation, so they will see their special area classes every 2 weeks. The TVLA students will be pulled out of the classes. They'll be pulled into a TVLA class that's separate, including the 5th grade in the elementary model. And talking about the secondary hybrid plan with a little more detail is a coordinator of grades 6 through 12, Sarah Lynn.
The secondary hybrid plan is the same as the elementary one as far as the schedule of when students will be in face-to-face and when students will be at home. You can see with the 2 cohorts, the blue and the orange cohort, A through L is in person Monday and Wednesday and at home Tuesday, Thursday, and M through Z is in person Tuesday and Thursday and at home on Mondays and Wednesdays. But with grade levels 5 through 12 comes a little bit more flexibility for students and a little bit more flexibility for our teachers because of the independence level of our students. So teachers are going to have the capability to live stream from class if it's necessary for a particular day's lesson. It can be a synchronous or an asynchronous lesson on any given day, depending on the learning outcomes for that day. The other main difference with the secondary hybrid plan comes with our Titans Virtual Learning Academy. So students that are enrolled in TVLA for grades 6 through 12 will actually stay with their current teachers in the classes that they're already enrolled in right now. With that flexibility to be synchronous or asynchronous, we have the capacity for our teachers to teach and actively engage all of our students regardless of their environment, whether it's face-to-face or at home. That allows our 6th to 12th grade TVLA students to stay with their current schedules.
The governor began to talk about the possibility of students coming back into school back over the summertime. He really laid out 5 things that had to be done in order to make sure that this could be done safely. Wash our hands and sanitize our hands, be able to physically distance ourselves, to clean and sanitize surfaces within our buildings, to monitor our health symptoms. And one of them that is essential is that we wear face coverings. And so our school board has adopted a face covering policy that we're going to require all students and staff to wear a face covering in school. This is, of course, because the coronavirus can be spread between individuals that are interacting in close proximity. And the best thing to help prevent the spread is wearing a face mask. Speaking, coughing, sneezing, this can all pass the germs on, and then other people then could get infected with the coronavirus. And so face masks are really, really important for us being able to bring kids back to school. Students in pre-K through 12 are going to be asked to do that, not only in the classroom, but on the bus. What we've asked our teachers to do, because obviously wearing a face mask all day can get tiring, is to make sure that they plan for face mask breaks throughout the day. There could be medical exemptions. You have to have that signed by a licensed healthcare professional, and it must be submitted to the school principal for approval. If this is something that you feel that your child might qualify for, you need to contact your child's principal. They will forward you the exemption form, and then you will be able to go through the process with your doctor. What we note on that form is that if you can't wear a face mask, that there will need to be then some other type of face covering that we're going to ask you to wear. For any student who might not want to wear a face mask, we do have the option of our Titans Virtual Learning Academy, which would still be an option for them as well. Masks for students will be available for any student who might need them. However, it's recommended that students wear their own reusable mask that may be a better fit, and they should probably also carry a backup mask with them. Masks will also be available on the school bus if a student happened to forget theirs, misplace their mask, etc. As I mentioned with mask breaks, we're going to try to give mask breaks, especially when the weather's permitting. More than likely, those will happen outside. Perhaps it could be the teacher taking their class outside, staying 6 feet apart. If it must be done inside, then we're going to ask that they find a space where students can be away from each other. There'll obviously be no visitors visiting the classroom during mask break times. Hands will be washed before and after any mask break. And we also ask teachers, especially at those younger levels, to designate a space in their room or right outside their room where they can excuse a child to be able to go take a break if they need it. And so we're just trying to be cognizant that students might not be used to this right now. It is worth recommending to parents that they begin this week of trying to get their child to wear their face mask so that the first time that they're not trying is when they come into school next Monday or Tuesday. Physical distancing expectations, one of those 5 recommendations is to try and create as much distance between you and the next person. With the hybrid model, we believe we can get at least very close to 6 feet of distancing between students with only half of our students in a classroom. So students are going to be asked to attempt to keep 6 feet of distance, especially when transitioning between classes, and follow all posted guidelines. It's really, really important that you don't try to push through an illness during this time, especially because it takes 2 to 14 days for symptoms to appear after exposure to the virus. So we really need to make sure that people are staying home if they're feeling any of these symptoms. Cleaning and disinfecting. We want to make parents know that we have really upped our cleaning and disinfecting protocols. We've taken and we have more extensive custodial staffs on first and second shifts. And the cleaning, sanitizing, and avoiding shared materials, it reduces the chance that students, staff, and volunteers will come in contact with viruses on surfaces. And so we must clean surfaces frequently, paying close attention to high-touch areas and shared materials. And we also are going to make sure that we have sanitation wipes and disinfectants available in each room and each common space. Students and teachers will work together to maintain clean and sanitary classrooms. We will have more frequent cleaning of desks, tables, and other surfaces, doorknobs and handles, railings, faucets, etc. We're going to ask that, especially in the high school and the middle school, that when there are cohort changes between kids, that we have those desktops and surfaces wiped down before the next cohort comes in. And every evening, we do a deep cleaning of our facilities where kids are so that we make sure that they are cleaned and disinfected for the next day. There is no doubt that there is more risk in coming into school than staying home. But what we're hoping to do with our protocols is mitigate that risk to make it as minimal as possible by cleaning and sanitizing, by physically distancing, making sure that we assess our symptoms at home, that we wear face masks, and that we always wash and sanitize our hands. So some of the things that we talk about to reduce our health risk, cleaning and washing our hands, and sanitizing using hand sanitizer. We have hand sanitizer in many of our common areas, in and out of classrooms. We've brought in some mobile hand washing stations as well. We're going to create one-way stairways and hallways when possible. Obviously, for this school year, there'll be no large group events, assemblies, or field trips. There'll be no visitors to our buildings, and each building will have very specific pickup and drop-off protocols that the building principal will go over with you during their presentation this week. There'll be some limited locker use at some levels, but basically when the child will have their own locker to themselves and they won't need to share. And water fountains will be turned off, so every child is going to be asked to bring a water bottle to school, and we will have water bottle filling stations where they will go to fill those up so that they don't get dehydrated during the school day. Clinic procedures, I just think it's important to note for parents that we'll have basically 2 clinics in every building, an A clinic and a B clinic. One of those clinics will be our well clinic, where children would come for medications that they might need to take on a daily basis. And the other will be for our children who have symptoms of COVID-19, and that we will care for them until which time we can get someone to come in to pick them up and bring them home. So that's what we'll have, an isolation area, and any student who displays those symptoms will be there. We'll contact the parent guardian and have them come pick them up. We have been in close contact with the Cuyahoga County Board of Health in developing our hybrid plan, and there is a pretty detailed plan. Should a student or a staff member become positive, they need to notify the district, and then we will begin our contact tracing. The Cuyahoga County Board of Health works with us to implement a quarantine procedure for any individual who was in close contact to a confirmed positive case. A close contact is someone who's considered 15 minutes or more within 6 feet of that individual. So in the event of a positive case, we always work with the Cuyahoga County Board of Health. It could be possible that a classroom, a building, or the district might be directed to move to remote learning if there is a confirmed outbreak in a classroom, building, or district. Hopefully not. This next slide illustrates, it's just an example of what contact tracing looks like. It helps us protect students, staff members, families, and the entire community by letting people know that they may have been exposed to COVID-19 and should monitor their health for signs and symptoms. So there's a positive case, and on this example, in both the classroom example and the school example, that is indicated or symbolized by the red X. The blue dots are the primary contact, who would have been within 6 feet for a time period of 15 minutes or longer, and then the orange squares are secondary contacts. Those secondary contacts would be people who would probably need to monitor their symptoms, but would not need to quarantine. The blue dots, the primary contacts, would more than likely need to quarantine, and we would work with the Cuyahoga County Board of Health to make that determination. But there would be contact from the district. We would update our board where we keep track of that per week, and we would also let the school community know that this had happened. Every building will have very specific arrival and dismissal procedures. Entrances and exits will be very clearly marked with signage. You'll see it's not going to look like school when you left back in March. There'll be a lot of signs talking about making sure that you physically distance, to make sure that you're wearing your mask, to wash your hands, a lot of reminders and signs up throughout the building. Bus riders and car riders, we will work to try and make sure they're dismissed at staggered times. Once again, we don't want large groups of students coming out the door cluttered together at one time. So we'll work our schedules so that we have students staggered as they come in and they leave. Buses will be unloaded and loaded one at a time. We'll have our doors propped open so students aren't grabbing the handles at arrival and dismissal. And of course, there'll be hand sanitizer at all the entrances and exits, and please encourage your children to use those. Transportation will, one of the things you'll notice is that about half the children will be on the bus, which of course is because only half the students are going to be in class. While the students are on the bus, they are required to wear a face covering when entering, when riding, and when exiting the bus. We will make every attempt within the hybrid model to have one student per seat. Of course, if there is that rare case where there are more than an instance where we have more students than we can fit in on one student per seat, then we might have to double up. We'll look first to do that with family members, and then we will go from there. But obviously, all students will be required to wear a mask. Bus drivers are required to wear face coverings at all times. We do clean and sanitize our bus between our AM and PM routes, and also we have hand sanitizer on all of our school buses. Recess for students in grades kindergarten through 5th grade. They will have recess time every day. Each school's recess schedules will be assessed to provide as much distancing as possible. Once again, each school will determine what their recess plan looks like, and the principal will go over that this week with their families. Whenever possible, we want to be outside and trying to physically distance and stay 6 feet apart. Students will have recess with their cohorts, same groups of children, so we're not exposing them to other kids. We will disinfect the equipment daily, and students will be asked to wash and sanitize their hands before and after recess every day. Food service, we have the ability to feed all of our students this year until December 31st, 2020. The USDA announced that all students are eligible to receive free breakfast and lunch until December 31st, 2020, or until the funds run out. So the Berea City School District will be providing meals for our hybrid students and our TVLA students. In-person meals, so when your children are in school, those meals will be provided during assigned breakfast and lunch times. On days your student is not in person, meals must be picked up from your student's school between 11 a.m. and 12 p.m. You may choose to not pick up on those days if you can't make it into school. Meals will be picked up. The meals that you pick up will include one breakfast and one lunch for that current day. A form will be sent out each Wednesday to your email to be filled out by Sunday at 10 p.m. for that next week. There will be more details coming through an email from Mrs. Brianna Cates, who is our Director of Food Service, soon. This will conclude our hybrid plan presentation. It's important to note that each individual school will have details of what the hybrid will look like for their school, pickup locations, drop-off locations, what food service and recess will look like, transitions between classes, what their special schedules will look like. There'll be recorded presentation from each individual school that will be made live for parents and for students. Please note that the middle school and the middle school will have an open house for our middle school students this week, and our high school has 2 nights planned on Wednesday and Thursday for our high school students to be able to walk their schedules so they know where they're going next week on Monday and Tuesday. And we look forward to seeing the students in our schools very soon. We're so excited to have our kids back, even if it's only 2 days a week. We know that we're heading in the right direction, and hopefully we're at 5 days a week sooner rather than later. Thank you, everybody. Please remember to wash your hands, wear a face covering, and maintain your physical distance so we can get our kids back to school 5 days a week. Thank you very much.